joining us once again on this Bible Tracts broadcast. I'm your host, Mike McCurry, and it is my great privilege to be speaking to you today. If this is your first time joining us this week, you will notice what appears to be road noise, some background sound, and you would be exactly right. I'm actually talking to you from the road. Of course, serving as the director of Bible Tracts Incorporated, I also have the privilege of being called into full-time evangelism, and the opportunity presents itself to be on a plane or in a car many times, sometimes multiple times a week. But today, the reason that we're actually recording in a car is because the opportunity presented itself for my dad to be with me. Chris McCurry is in the car, and he'll be speaking to you in just a moment. I promised you that we would be speaking about parenting today, and we're going to get there in just a moment. Before we do that, I would like to say, especially for those of you that have been listening all week, thank you. Greatly appreciate that. I would like to say God has opened amazing doors of opportunity for us literally around the world. But if you'd like to know more about our ministry, please feel free to visit our website, BibleTractsInc.org. Now, at the conclusion of the program, the announcer will be on, and he'll tell you more about our ministry, tell you how you can contact us. What we do at Bible Tracts Incorporated is we print, ship, and distribute completely free gospel literature, Bible tracts. We do that around the world. The only way that we can do that is by the grace of God and the giving of God's generous people just like you. And we thank you so much for people that might be listening right now that have given money that will allow this program to be on the airwaves in your area, will allow you to order free tracts. If you'd like to order some tracts today, you can do that on our website, BibleTractsInc.org. Now, we're going to talk with my dad on the program about the usage of tracts and why they're so important, and kind of bring everything back home on the Friday edition, the very last day of the week for this broadcast. But without further ado, if you would, Dad, just say a word to the folks, and then we're going to jump into this idea of parenting.
Okay. Well, it's been great to be with you this week, and I think you've covered some things that hopefully will be a help to your listeners. Certainly, it's no credit to myself or to your mom. It's just God used us over the years. Been saved a little over 30 years, getting saved in January 1989, and had the opportunity to serve now in my 11th different local Baptist church as the military moved us around. And so we're just fortunate that God's been able to use us in any way.
Absolutely. And I know there are listeners that are listening right now that might have some great questions that they'd like to ask either my dad or myself. And if you have any questions at all about anything that we've talked about, please feel free to contact us. Again, the announcer will be on at the conclusion of the broadcast to tell you how you can do that. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about parenting today is very specifically because so much of what I've learned, whether I'm applying it well or not, but so many of the things that I've learned about parenting, I learned from my parents, and they did things well. So oftentimes, in many situations, you can learn more how not to do things than how to do things. But I will say I learned so many things about how to do things in raising my children. Now, my dad and my mom had 3 boys, myself, my middle brother Caleb, and my youngest brother Ethan. And of course, the Lord saw fit to give me 2 girls. So there are some things that may not exactly apply across the board, but many of those things will. And we've talked about raising a family in church, and we won't belabor that point. But jumping right into it here, what are some of maybe the biggest keys? And I know this is kind of an open-ended question, but we've talked about consistency, we've talked about the local church, but what are some other things that jump to mind for those that might be out there listening that maybe you're struggling with a problem child or struggling with exactly how to handle their children? What are some things that come to mind from your personal experience, Dad?
Well, first I want to say that, by God's grace, you and your brothers have turned out, I think, well. To no credit to your mom or myself, I think God just used us. And I think you even mentioned on one of the earlier broadcasts that you can raise children as biblically as possible, but the children still have a choice. And so we're blessed that, you and your brothers are faithful members of local churches. You're soul winners. You've done well. And so we give God all the credit for that. I think one of the things that we often overlook is realizing that the Bible teaches us many principles for how to raise children. I thought back to the time when we took you home from the hospital. This was back in April of 1992. Your mom and I even struggled on how to hook the car seat up. And it's just a reminder, kids don't necessarily come with a set of instructions. But if we just use God's perfect word, there are many principles and guidelines that your mom and I tried to apply. Were we perfect? Absolutely not. And you and your brothers would remind us of those errors. But at the same time, we try to use God's perfect instruction manual to us on how to minister to our family, realizing that I was ultimately responsible as the man of the home. I was responsible for everything that our family did or didn't do. Did I make every wise decision? No, I did not. But I realized that it wasn't your mom's responsibility, and it certainly wasn't your responsibility as the children. It was my responsibility as the head of the home to set the spiritual direction for our family. That meant we were going to be faithful to church. It meant that we wanted to put you in an environment where what we were being taught at church, we were practicing at home, and we also subsequently wanted to try to have your education based on the same way. For us, since we were moving every several years in the military, we chose to have homeschooling for you and your brothers. I realize that may not be a practical thing for everyone, but that was the right decision for us. It provided a lot of consistency. It also provided you good Bible teaching on a daily basis, and it made it consistent with what we were trying to teach you at home as well as what was being taught at the church.
Absolutely. And one thing that I'd like to parse out for just a moment is you mentioned that everything was biblically based. I think a lot of times that we get to a place where our opinions or the opinions of that parenting book that somebody loans you, when those things run crossways with the Bible, then you have a choice to make. You either choose to go with God's word or you choose to go with man's opinion. And I can safely say, whenever you choose to go with man's opinion, sooner or later you will see the error of your ways. And there have been many, whether it be Dr. Spock or many other folks, commentators on parenting, all the way down through history, that have realized that biblical principles, biblical values still work, even in the 21st century. Yes, the Bible does not directly reference how to handle cell phones and at what age your children should have them and all of those things, but there are biblical principles and convictions that you can base your life off of, and I think you and Mom did a good job of that. But understand this, that when everything you do in your life is based off of the foundation of the Bible, you have a rock that you can run back to. When you and Mom or whoever, and those of you that are listening right now, when there's a disagreement, it can very easily be rectified when you just have the Bible as the final authority in the home. Now, you've heard us mention that the fact that we've attended Baptist churches all throughout our life. And the reason for that, and just for a moment here, is because many times, in very many cases, Baptist church lines up most closely with the Bible. And I'll say this very bluntly. If there was a church that lined up more closely with the Bible, then I would attach my membership to that church. But that's the sort of credo, and that's a sort of idea that we, the McCurry family, and this is not to pat ourselves on the back, please understand, but that's the sort of idea and mantra that we've had throughout our life because of the foundation that Chris McCurry, my dad, left us with, that the Bible was the final authority. It wasn't what Mom said. It wasn't what Dad said. Everything was based off of the Bible. And so when you have that higher authority, everything becomes easier. Now, you mentioned trying to make sure that everything was pulling in the same direction.
Right.
Parents, the preaching, the church atmosphere, and then the education. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there are so many people listening right now that are not in a financial position, not in a position themselves to put their children in some sort of Christian education. Let me say this, you are not without hope. you still very much have the opportunity to raise good Christian young people. Understand this: it's going to come with a lot of prayer. Just like every set of children that you raise, it's always going to come with a lot of prayer. But if you would pray specifically that God maybe does open the door for your children to be raised as closely to the nurture and admonition of the Lord as possible, I think you would be well off. Now, I don't want to take up the rest of the time with my thoughts because we have my dad on the program for a reason. But what is another thought that you might have for those out there that are listening with maybe children that are still in the home, some things that you reflect back on that you feel like, again, not to pat you on the back, but things that you think you did well or things maybe you could have even improved upon?
Well, I think one thing was having family devotions. And I know sometimes people struggle with what do I do? They may not feel adequate or spiritually grounded themselves. I can tell you, if you started with something as simple as helping your children, if you're faithful to your church and you have a memory verse, or your children have a memory verse, to take time and practice that. Maybe sing some kids' Bible songs. It doesn't have to be like a full service. It doesn't have to be big and elaborate. We did different things. We practiced memorizing the books of the Bible. But that's one of the things, just to try to keep the Bible present in our home. Obviously, today with the technology, I would encourage you put some filters and some guards, limit the access that your children have, because with the cell phones today, our children can get so much filth right there that before, you'd have to get it through cable TV. So I do think there's some safeguards that as parents that we have to take some effort to make sure that we do protect our children. But family devotions is one of the things we tried to be consistent. There were times that we probably slipped and weren't as faithful as we needed to be. But that is one thing that I would think that many times missing in our Christian homes nowadays.
Absolutely. And you'll notice so many times everything keeps coming back to keeping the Bible visible, keeping the Bible present. And you may say we need to have some balance, and we need to raise well-adjusted kids that are well-rounded and have the ability to converse with people out in the world, and that's absolutely fine. That's great. And I would hazard a guess that I am not the most ill-adjusted person in the world, because my parents, they allowed me to play some sports, and I remember playing a little soccer on the base and t-ball and some different basketball and some different things like that. But you must understand that God did say, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And when you allow anything to trump the importance of God, you see, I never once that I recall went to a basketball practice in lieu of going to church. If it ever conflicted, we always chose the most biblical option, which just happened to be church, just happened to be the things of God. And so when things that you put great importance on, your children will recognize that. They're sponges. I see that in my two little ones. I have Emmy and Lucy. We're coming to the close of the broadcast here, but Emmy and Lucy just sponge up everything, and your children will too. So be careful what you put in front of them. Tomorrow on the broadcast, we're going to talk about Bible tracts and how they've influenced my father's life. You have a great day for God's glory. God bless.